Yo, this your boy Pomo. Welcome to Godspeed TV. Tonight we're gonna talk about the story of Joseph straight out of the Quran. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And I'm gonna do it live today. I'm doing it a little bit different. The sun's shining. Went past my house over to them from the east, setting the west. But I'll let you hear from Alan Watts before I get started. While I roll up, get myself situated. You know what I'm saying?
Some people will use symbolism of the relationship of God to the universe, wherein God is, say, brilliant light,
and tonight we talk about
only somehow veiled, hiding underneath all these forms that you see as you look around. So far, so good. But the truth is funnier than that. It is that you are looking right at the brilliant light now, that the experience you are having, which you call ordinary everyday consciousness, pretending you're not it, that experience is exactly the same thing as it. There's no difference at all. And when you find that out, you laugh yourself silly. That's the great discovery. In other words, when you really start to see things, and you look at an old paper cup, and you go into the nature of what it is to see, what vision is, or what smell is, or what touch is, you realize that that vision of the paper cup is the brilliant light of the cosmos. Nothing could be brighter. 10,000 suns couldn't be brighter. Only they're hidden in the sense that all the points of the infinite light are so tiny, you see them in the cup. They don't blow your eyes out. But it is actually, see, the source of all light is in the eye. If there were no eyes in this world, the sun would not be light. You evoke light out of the universe. In the same way, you, by virtue of having a soft skin, evoke hardness out of wood. Wood is only hard in relation to a soft skin. It's your eardrum that evokes noise out of the air. You, by being this organism, call into being the whole universe of light and color and hardness and heaviness and everything, you see? But in the mythology that we've sold ourselves on during the end of the 19th century, when people discovered how big the universe was, and that we live on a little planet in a solar system on the edge of a galaxy, which is a minor galaxy, everybody thought, we're really unimportant after all. God isn't there and doesn't love us. Nature doesn't give a damn. And we put ourselves down, see? But actually, it's this little funny microbe, tiny thing, crawling on this little planet, that's way out somewhere, who has the ingenuity, by nature of this magnificent organic structure, to evoke the whole universe out of what would otherwise be mere quanta. There's jazz going on. But you see, this little ingenious organism is not merely some stranger in this. This little organism on this little planet is what the whole show is growing there, and so realizing its own presence.
So we're going to pause right there, realizing its own presence. Demonstrate, let me get down. I'm reading from the Holy Quran. Back in the day, they used to call me Quran, and I'm going to tell a little story before I go into this. I had made this song called Black Jesus, and I don't know why I made it, but I made it because I had started to understand, fell up into the the seventh spirit of the imagination. And when it hit my nervous system, it didn't shut me down. You know what I'm saying? And let me fix this. It didn't shut me down. So I took the song like a little CD. That's when CDs was out. And he was selling final cards on the corner. He was a Muslim. And I used to buy from him all the time. I used to read them like, man, this shit like dope. You know what I'm saying? So I found out that I made a CD, and then he was intrigued by it. You got a vivid imagination, you got a lawyer, you know what I'm saying? So it was just a story of how my imagination got me to actually meet Minister Farrakhan in person, You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna read from the comical place, this Sora, and the general argument of Soras. In the subject matter, this story is entirely taken up with the story recapitulated rather than told of Joseph, the youngest, or one of the 12 sons of the parchment or patriarch Jacob. We get comfortable. Patriarch Jacob. The story is called the most beautiful of the stories for many reasons. It is most detailed of any in the Quran. It is full of many reasons. It is the most detailed, full of the human vicissitudes, and has therefore diversely appealed to men and women of all classes. It paints in vivid colors. It paints in vivid colors with their spiritual implications. So it paints in vivid colors with their spiritual implications. The most varied aspect of life that the patriarch, old age, and the confidence between him and his little best beloved son, the elder brother's jealousy of his little son, their plot and their father's grief, the sale of the father's darling into slavery for a miserable little price. Cardinal love contrasts with purity and chastising and chastity, false charges, prison, and the interpretation of dreams, low life and high life, innocent raised to honor, the sweet revenge of forgiveness and benevolence, high matters of state, admiration, humility, and exaltation, faithful love, and the beauty and petty of truth, and the beauty of petty and truth. So I'm gonna let him finish talking like in myself situated. In this place, welcome to Godspeed TV. We're talking about the story of Joseph, the coat of many colors, the coat of many colors, aka the seven spirit, supreme imagination. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna let my boy Adam Watch speak on his situation.
Well,
Right.
now here's the problem. If this is the state of affairs, which is so, and if the consciousness state you're in at this moment is the same thing as what we might call the divine state, if you do anything to make it different, it shows you don't understand that it's so. So the moment you start practicing yoga, or praying, or meditating, or indulging in some sort of spiritual cultivation, you are getting in your own way.
316.
The Buddha said, we suffer because we desire. If you can give up desire, you won't suffer. But he didn't say that as the last word. He said that as the opening step of a dialogue. Because if you say that to someone, they're going to come back after a while and say, yes, but I'm now desiring not to desire. And so the Buddha will answer, well, at last you're beginning to understand the point. Because you can't give up desire. Why would you try to do that? It's already desire. So in the same way, you say, oh, you ought to be unselfish, or to give up your ego. Let go, relax. Why do you want to do that? Just because it's another way of beating the game, isn't it? The moment you see you hypothesize that you are different from the universe, you want to get one up on it. But if you try to get one up on the universe, and you're in competition with it, it means you don't understand you are it. You think there's a real difference between self and other. But self, what you call yourself and what you call other, are mutually necessary to each other, like back and front. They're really one. But just as a magnet polarizes itself in north and south, but it's all one magnet, so experience polarizes itself as self and other, but it's all one. So if you try to make the North Pole get the mastery of it, or the South Pole get the mastery of the North Pole, you show you don't know what's going on. A guru or teacher who wants to get this across to somebody because he knows it himself. And when you know it, you like others to see it too.
So we're going to pause the story of Joseph. Joseph, that's within you. Let me go where I can see if anybody got any comments, questions, going up in there, answer. Give me time. We're going to take our time today with this. So like from where I left off, The story is similar to, but not identical with the biblical story, but the atmosphere is wholly different. The biblical story is like a folk tale in which morality has no place. Its tendency is to exalt the clever and financially minded. Its tendency is to exalt the clever and financially minded Jew against the Egyptian, and to explain certain ethics and tribal polarities or particularities in later Jewish history. Joseph is shown as buying up all the cattle and the land of the poor Egyptians for the state under the stress of famine conditions, and in mistaking the Israel rulers over Pharaoh's cattle. The Quranic history, on the other hand, is less a narrative than highly spiritual sermon or allegory explaining the seeming contradictions in life, the enduring nature of virtues in a world full of flux and change, and the marvelous working of Allah's eternal purpose in His plan has unfolded to us the wide canvas of history. This aspect of the matter has been a favorite with the Muslim energies. Now, the summary. Life is a dream, a vision, to explain by stories and parables. We call this rocket ship mode, Sandman. As it is, and you're going to notice the sun, time, this how I tell time, when you go down, it get darker. You know what I'm saying? When I got a candle, you see that one still situated. Yeah, I got a candle, might help the situation. But anyway, life is a dream and a vision to be explained by stories and parables. And it is the prescriptious Arabic Quran, the truth, which Joseph, the prophet of Allah, saw in his vision and was unpalatable to his 10 half brothers who plotted against him and sold him into slavery to the merchants for a few pieces of silver. Joseph was taken by the merchants into Egypt, was bought by a great Egyptian court dignitary who was Aziz or Aziz, A-Z-I-Z, Aziz, who adopted him. The dignitary wiped salt, but in vain to attract Joseph to the delights of the earthly love. You see what I'm saying? She wants to seduce him. Like, yeah, I hear you with that God body shit, but nigga, come on, we gonna keep going. I'll take over.
So what he does is he gets you into being ridiculous harder and more assiduously than usual. In other words, if you are in a contest with the universe, he's going to stir up that contest until it becomes ridiculous. And so he sets you such tasks as saying, now of course, in order to be a true person, you must give up yourself. Be unselfish. So the Lord steps down out of heaven and says, first and great commandment is, thou shalt love the Lord thy God. You must love me. Well, that's a double bind. You can't love on purpose. You can't be sincere purposely. It's like trying not to think of a green elephant while taking medicine. But if a person really tries to do it, so, this is where Christianity is rigged. You should be very sorry for your sins. Though everybody knows they're not. But they think they ought to be. And so they go around trying to be penitent. Or trying to be humble. And they know the more assiduously they practice it, the phonier and phonier the whole thing gets. And so in this way, it's what it's called the technique of reductio ad absurdum. If you think you have a problem, you see, that you're an ego and that you're in difficulty, the answer that the Zen master makes to you is, show me your ego. I want to see this thing that has a problem. When Bodhidharma, the legendary founder of Zen, came to China, a disciple came to him and said, I have no peace of mind. Please pacify my mind. And Bodhidharma said, bring out your mind here before me and I'll pacify it. Well, he said, when I look for it, I can't find it. So Bodhidharma said, there, it's pacified. See, because when you look for your own mind, that is to say your own particularized center of being, which is separate from everything else, you won't be able to find it. But the only way you'll know it isn't there is if you look for it hard enough to find out that it isn't there. And so everybody says, all right, know yourself, look within, find out who you are. Because the harder you look, you won't be able to find it. And then you'll realize that it isn't there at all. There isn't a separate you. Your mind is what there is. Everything. But the only way to find that out is to persist in the state of delusion as hard as possible. That's one way. I don't say the only way, but it is one way. And so almost all spiritual disciplines, meditations, prayers, etc., are ways of persisting in folly. Doing resolutely and consistently what you're doing already. So if a person believes that the earth is flat, you can't talk him out of that. He knows it's flat. You go out of the window and see it. Obviously, it looks flat. So the only way to convince him that it isn't is to say, well, let's go and find the edge. And in order to find the edge, you've got to be very careful not to walk in circles, or you'll never find it that way. So we've got to go consistently in a straight line, due west, along the same line of latitude. Eventually, when we get back to where we started from, you've convinced the guy that the earth is round.
I'm saying that. Let me straighten up. Breathe. Hold on. All right. King had a vision. It was Joseph, through the cupbearer, got an opportunity of explaining. Joseph insisted that all the scandal that had been raised about him should be publicly cleared. He would receive into favor and was appointed wizard or Wu-Tang by the king. His half-brothers, driven by Pharaoh, came to Egypt and were treated kindly by Joseph without their knowing his identity. He asked him to bring his full brother, the youngest son Benjamin. Joseph detains Benjamin, and by strategizing convictions, his half-brothers, their hatred and crime against himself, forgave them and sent them to bring Jacob and the whole family to Canaan, to Egypt. Israel, Jacob is confronted or comforted. So I'm going to say it again. Israel, Jacob comes, comforted, and settles in Egypt. The name of Allah is glorified. The truth of Allah endures forever, and Allah's purpose is fully revealed in the hereafter. Y'all gotta pardon me, you know what I'm saying? I had a little situation. I was boxing Smith, and he kind of fucked me up, you know what I'm saying? So I'd be like, but I'm trying to get it together, you know what I'm saying? Everybody go through something. I went through my dark night of the soul, and you know, I lost half my fucking jaw and my teeth. So you gotta understand the part, you know what I'm saying? My brain was, like that, the Kanye West files, you know what I'm saying? PTSD is real. That song. I'm gonna let my man finish up.
But that's the only way that'll teach it. Because people can't be talked out of illusions. But now there is another possibility, however. But this is more difficult to describe. Let's say we take as the basic supposition, which is the thing that one sees in the experience of Satori or awakening or whatever you want to call it, that this now moment in which I'm talking and you're listening is eternity. That although we have somehow conned ourselves into the notion that this moment is rather ordinary and that we may not feel very well and that we're sort of vaguely frustrated and worried and so on, and that it ought to be changed. This is it. So you don't need to do anything at all. But the difficulty about explaining that is that you mustn't try not to do anything, because that's doing something. And how to explain that? Because there's nothing to explain. It is the way it is now. You see? And if you understand that, it will automatically wake you up. That's why Zen teachers use shock treatment to sometimes why they hit people or shout at them or create a sudden surprise. Because it is that jolt that suddenly brings you here. See, there's no road to here because you're already there. And if you ask me, how am I going to get here? It'll be like the famous story of the American tourist in England who asked some yokel the way to Upper Tuddenham, the little village. The yokel scratched his head and he said, well, sir, I do know where it is, but if I were you, I wouldn't start from here.
Let's go. Yusuf, or Joseph, in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Air, capital A, capital I, capital R. These are verses of the conspicuous book. We have sent it down as a Arabic Quran in order that ye may learn wisdom and focus. We do relate unto thee the most beautiful of stories, in that we reveal to thee this portion of the Quran. Before this, thou too was among those who knew of it not. Behold, Joseph said to his father, O my father, why hast thou forsaken? Sound familiar? Signs and verses of the Quran. The whole of Joseph's story is a sign or a miracle, a wonder-working exposition of a plan and purpose of Allah. The permanent meaning of Mubin, M-U-B-I-N, here is that one explains or makes things clear. Quran teaches, or Quran means something to read or recite, proclaim. It may apply to a verse or a surah, or to the whole book of Revelations. Most beautiful of stories, eloquence consists in it conveying by a word or a hint many meanings for those who can understand and wish to learn wisdom. Not only is Joseph's story beautiful in that sense, Joseph himself was renowned for manly beauty. The women of Egypt called him a noble angel, and the beauty of his exterior form was a symbol of the beauty of his inner soul. For the parable, all that is necessary to know about Joseph is that he was one of the chosen ones of Allah, not the chosen one, but one of the chosen ones of Allah. Amir Voltron, who unite and become supreme. For the story is necessary to set down a few more details. His father was Jacob, also called Israel, the son of Isaac, the younger son of Abraham, the elder son having been Ishmael, whose story is told in 21, 22, 29. Abraham may be called the father of the line of Semitic prophecy. Jacob had 4 wives. For 3 of them, let him keep speaking. So remember, Jacob had 4 wives.
So you see, when you ask, how do I attain the knowledge of God? How do I attain nirvana, liberation? All I can say is it's the wrong question.
Wives, Maya, judgments.
Why do you want to attain it? Because the very fact that you're wanting to attain it is the only thing that prevents you from getting there. You already have it. But of course, it's up to you. It's your privilege to pretend that you don't. That's your game. That's your life game. That's what makes you think you're an ego. And when you want to wake up, you will. Just like that. If you're not awake, it shows you don't want to. You're still playing the hide part of the game. You're still, as it were, the self, pretending it's not the self. That's what you want to do. So you see, in that way too, you're already there. When you understand this, a funny thing happens. And some people misinterpret it. You will discover, as this happens, that the distinction between voluntary and involuntary behavior disappears. You will realize that what you describe as things under your own will, feel exactly the same as things going on outside you. You watch other people moving and you know you're doing that. Just like you're breathing or circulating your blood. If you don't understand what's going on, you're liable to get crazy at this point and to feel that you are God in the Jehovah sense. Say that you actually have power over other people so that you could alter what they're doing, and that you are omnipotent in a very crude, literal kind of Bible sense. See?
Take over. Let me get a little bit of that. So you're saying, I did see elevated stars in the sun and the moon. I saw them prostrate themselves to me, said the Father, my clearest little son. Relate not thy vision to thy brothers, lest they cannot a plot against thee, for Satan is to man an avowed enemy. Thus will thy Lord choose thee and teach thee the interpretation of the stories, and perfect his favor. Now, when we talk about he had, make sure we go back. He had 10 sons, so let's go back. 4 from 3 of them, of his 4 wives, he had 10 sons. In his old age, he had from Rachel, Rachel, a very beautiful woman, 2 sons, Joseph and Benjamin, the youngest. The place where Jacob and his family and his flock were located was in Canaan, Egypt. 7 skill, supreme imagination, coating many colors in any situation. And is shown by tradition near modern Nubius, ancient Shechem, some 30 miles north of Jerusalem. The traditional site of the well into which Joseph was thrown by his brothers is still shown in the neighborhood. Yeah. The young lad, Yusuf, was innocent and did not even know of his brother's guilt and hatred, but the father knew and warned him. And he said his father or his other father. So he got a daddy which is on earth and his daddy in heaven warned him. That's why he gave him that dream. If Joseph was to be of the elect, he must understand and interpret signs and events aright. He must understand and interpret signs and events aright. The imagination of the pure sees truth, which does not so endowed cannot understand. The dream of the righteous prefigure great events, while dreams of the futile are mere or carnal are mere idle futilities or fatalities. Even things that happen to us are often like dreams. The righteous man receives disaster in reverse, not with blasphemy against Allah, but with humble devotion seeking the assertion of his will. I do the will of my Father. I do the will of God. I do the will of God in all ways possible. Nor does he receive good fortune with arrogance, but as an opportunity for doing good to friends and foes alike. His attributes to history and stories is the same. He seeks to edify material which leads to Allah. Arm, leg, arm, head, Voltron. Let's go back. That's what I'm trying to display now.
And a lot of people feel that and they go crazy. They have to put them away. They think they're Jesus Christ and that everybody ought to fall down and worship. That's only they got their wires crossed. They haven't been able to, this experience happened to them, but they don't know how to interpret it. So be careful of that. Jung calls it inflation. People who get the holy man syndrome, that I suddenly discovered that I'm the Lord and that I'm above good and evil and so on, and that therefore I start giving myself airs and graces. But the point is everybody else is too. If you discover that you're that, then you ought to know that everybody else is. Well, for example, let's see how in other ways you might realize this. Most people think when they open their eyes and look around that what they are seeing is outside. It seems, doesn't it, that you are behind your eyes. And that behind the eyes there is a blank. You can't see it all. Turn around and you see something else in front of you. But behind the eyes there seems to be something that has no color. It isn't dark, it isn't light, it's just, it's there from a tactile standpoint. You can feel it with your fingers, although you don't get inside it. what is that behind your eyes, you see? Well, actually, when you look out there and see all these people and things sitting around, that's how it feels inside your head. The color of this room is back here in the nervous system, where the optical nerves are at the back of the head. It's in there. It's what you're experiencing. What you see out here is a neurological experience. Now, if that hits you, and you feel sensuously that that's so, you may think that then therefore, the external world is all inside my skull. But you've got to correct that with the thought that your skull is also in the external world. So you suddenly begin to feel, well, wow, what a kind of a situation is this? It's inside me, and I'm inside it, and it's inside me, and I'm inside it. But that's the way it is. This is the, what you could call, transaction, rather than interaction, between the individual and the world.
To the prosperity of Jacob, even as he perfected it to thy father Abraham, Isaac, aforetime, for that Lord is full of knowledge and wisdom. Verily, and Joseph, his brethren, are signs for seekers after truth. They said, truly, Joseph and his brothers are loved more than by our father than we. For we are a godly or God body of a people. Really, our father is obviously in error. Like, fuck that nigga. Like, what the fuck he talking about? Check him, you know what I'm saying? I gotta understand how rap. So all of the spells and shit that he trying to pull on me don't never motherfucking work. So I'm gonna keep motherfucking going. I'm gonna fuck in this bitch. Let me try and work that call shit, but man, quit playing. Sit some circle in your motherfucking ass. Alright, where we at? Slay ye Joseph, or cast him out to some unknown land, that so favor of your father may be given to you alone. Get rid of this nigga, you know. Whatever happens is a result of Allah's will and plan. As he is good and wise, and he knows all things. Therefore, we must trust him. In Joseph's case, he could look back to his father and to Abraham and to truth, to righteousness, whom through all adversities kept his face pure and undefiled and won through. In Joseph's story, we have a good and evil contrast in so many different ways. Those in search of true spiritual knowledge can see it embodied in concrete events. This story has the story of many facets, matching the colors of Joseph's many-colored coat. The 10 brothers envied and hated their innocent younger brother Joseph and Benjamin. Benjamin was a little road dog. Jacob had the wisdom to see that his young and innocent sons wanted protection and to perceive Joseph's spiritual greatness, his idea and his dream. But his wisdom to them was folly or madness or embellicosement or self. Meaning, man, come on, Dad, what you mean this nigga special? We out here playing the field, we getting it in, we making money. You talking about he got a dream, he gonna be king. You know what I'm saying? For that impossible trip. Because it touched their self-love and as truth does often, and they relied upon brute strength of numbers, the 10 heavy brethren against old Jacob, the lad Joseph, and the boy Benjamin. That's like sound like some Tupac shit going on here. You know what I'm talking about? We're gonna keep going. See the sun setting. We're gonna keep going though. See what happens.
Just like, for example, in buying and selling, there cannot be an act of buying unless there's simultaneously an act of selling, vice versa. So the relationship between the organism and the environment is transactional. The environment grows the organism, and in turn, the organism creates the environment. The organism turns the sun into light, but it requires there to be an environment containing a sun for there to be an organism at all. And the answer to it is simply they're all one process. And it isn't that organisms by chance came into this world. Put it rather that this world is the sort of environment which grows organisms. It was that way from the beginning. Just in the same way, the organisms made in time have arrived in the scene or out of the scene later than the beginning of the scene. But from the moment it went bang in the beginning, that's the way it started. Organisms like us sitting here, were involved in it. You see, look here, let's take the propagation of an electric current. I can have an electric current running through a wire that goes all the way around the Earth. And here we have our power source. Here we have a switch. All right. Here's the positive pole. Here's the negative pole.
Cool.
Now, before that switch closes, the current doesn't exactly behave like water in a pipe. There isn't current here waiting to jump the gap as soon as the switch is closed. The current doesn't even start until the switch is closed from the positive pole. It never starts unless the point of arrival is there. Now, it'll take an interval for that current to get going, and circuit, if it's going all the way around the Earth. It's a long run. But the finishing point has to be closed before it will even start from the beginning.
Jack, Mysteria, Surat, Yusuf, Joseph, Seven Spirits, Supreme Imagination. Read this right. I'll touch it too. There'll be a time enough for you to be righteous after that, said one of them. Slay not Joseph, but if ye must do something, throw him down to the bottom of a well. He will be picked up by some carbon travelers, aka Masons. They said, "O our Father, why dost thou not trust us with Joseph, seeing we are indeed his sincere well-wishers?" Like, come on, Dad, let us, you know what I'm saying? Dad, like, whoa, how do you say this to your sons? Like, nigga, y'all trying to kill him. You know, in 3D, three-dimensional reality, you can't really say that. Spiritually, you can't. Sometimes you're like, fuck that, let's go. The plot having been formed, the plot having been formed, the brothers proceed to put it into execution. Jacob, knowing the situation, did not ordinarily trust his beloved Joseph as the brother. The latter themselves demonstrated in foreign brotherly affections. And we shall take every care of him, Jacob said. Really, it saddened me that ye should take him away. I fear lest a wolf should devour him, while ye attend not to him. While y'all doing some other shit. They said, if a wolf were to devour him, while we are so large a party, then should we be the loser. So they did take him away, and they did all agree to throw him down to the bottom of the well, and we put into his heart. So I'm gonna stop right there. So see how it's just understanding in a three-dimensional reality. He was telling them basically, I know what y'all own, and they were saying, well, Pops, you can't say that in three dimensions. You can't just come out and say, shit, you trying to kill your other son. How you gonna say that? So where was I at? I'll go back to this and then we're gonna read. And it's be 5 more. Fucking said in 3D.
In a similar way, although in the development of any physical system, there may be billions of years between the creation of the most primitive form of energy and then the arrival of intelligent life. That billions of years is just the same thing as the trip of the current around the wire. It takes a little time. But it's already implied. It takes time for an acorn to turn into an oak. But the oak is already implied in the acorn.
Man, already in motion.
So in any lump of rock floating about in space, there is implicit human intelligence. Sometime, somehow, somewhere. They all go together. So don't differentiate yourself and stand off against this and say, I am a living organism in a world made of a lot of dead junk, rocks and stuff. It all goes together. Those rocks are just as much you as your fingernails. You need rocks. What are you going to stand on? What I think, awakening really involves is a re-examination of our common sense.
Stop right there. They did not expect their protestations to be believed in. They didn't expect their daddy to go for it. But they added in an argument that might appeal both to Jacob and Joseph. See how slick shit can be right in your hood. Y'all gotta pay attention to this. They were going to give their young brother, a good time. Why not let him come out with them and play and enjoy himself to his heart's content? Jacob did not know the precise plot, but he had strong misgivings. He knew something was going on. But how could he put off these brothers? If they were driven to openly hostility, they would be certain to cause him harm. He must deal with the brothers wisely and consciously. He pleaded that he was an old man and would miss Joseph and be sad without him, man. I know if y'all don't miss bullshit, man, I'm telling you, it's gonna fuck up my heart. How y'all can do this to y'all brother and y'all daddy? And after all, Joseph was not was not of age to play with them. They would be attending their own affairs, and the wolf might come and attack and kill Joseph. In saying this, he was really unwillingly giving a cue to the wicked ones, for they used that very excuse in verse 17 below. Thus the wicked plot and thickens. Thus the wicked plot and thickens, or plot thickens. But there is a counterpart or a counterplan also, like in Napoleon Hill. We're gonna get to that in a second, which is drawing a noose of lies around the wicked ones, so that they are eventually driven into a corner and have to confess their own guilt in verse 91 below, and through repentance obtain forgiveness. IP address, Jehovah Witness. But the counter plan. So like we said, let me focus like on Napoleon Hill. It's saying in every grain of darkness there's a grain of light, there's a seed of hope, there's a seed you just gotta find it. So no matter how dark and detrimental the situation gets, you gotta see the light. And the more darkness, the harder it is to fall. Find it, the more powerful is that seed of light. It's gonna be effective when you find it in the night. So Jacob's objections as stated could be easily rebutted, and the brethren did so. They would be they would be 11 in party and 10 strong. Grown up men will have to perish before the wolf could touch the young lad Joseph. So they prevail as verbal arguments are adapted to prevail. 3D shit, like how you gonna explain spiritually what you see. When events are weaving their web on quite another level plan, which has nothing to do with verbal arguments. Presumably, Benjamin was too young to go with them. Allah was with Joseph in all his difficulties, sorrows, and suffering, as he is with all servants who put their trust in him. The poor lad was betrayed by his brethren and left perhaps to die and to be sold into slavery, but his heart was undaunted. He kept on, he kept on, he kept on.
We've got all sorts of ideas built into us, which seem unquestioned, obvious, and our speech reflects them. Communist phrases. Face the facts, as if they were outside. As if life was something you simply encountered as a foreigner. Face the facts. Our common sense has been rigged, you see, so that we feel strangers and aliens in this world And this is terribly plausible, simply because it's what we're used to. That's the only reason. But when you really start questioning this, say, is that the way I have to assume life is? I know everybody does, but does that make it true? It doesn't necessarily. It ain't necessarily so. And so then as you question this basic assumption that underlies our culture, you find you get a new kind of common sense. It becomes absolutely obvious to you that you are continuous with the universe. For example, people used to believe that the people who lived in the Antipodes would fall off. And that was scary.
So it was scary. This message of surety, thou shalt one day tell them the truth of this their affairs, while they perceive not. Then they came to their father in the early part of the night weeping. They said, O father, we went racing with another, and left Joseph with our things, and the wolf devoured him. But thou wilt never believe us, even though we tell the truth. They stained his shirt with false blood, he said. Nay, but your minds have made up a tale that may pass. With you, for me, patience is most fitting against that which is ye asserted. It is Allah alone who help me, who help can be sought. Then there came a caravan of travelers. They sent their water carriers for water, and he let down his bucket into the well. He said, Ah, there, good news. Here is a fine young man. So they concealed him as a treasure. But Allah, his courage never failed him. On the contrary, he had an inkling or a premonition of things that were to be, that his own recessitude and beauty of the soul would land him on his feet, and perhaps someday his brothers will stand in need of him, and he will be in a position to fulfill that need, and will do it gladly, putting them to shame for their persistent plotting and betrayal of him. Talking shit, you know what I'm saying? Niggas be sending shots and shit. I find it funny under the joke. Let me make sure I see myself say this shit. Yeah, I find it funny under the joke when niggas shoot shots at both. You know what I'm saying? To be cute, you know what I'm saying? Real cute, you know. It'd be funny, you know what I mean? They watch me like Flight say some bitch shit. Ooh, look at this, look at that. You know, this motherfucker might say, that nigga cut his beard. That is some gay shit. We gonna go back to Joseph. When you talking about non-sex, when you talking about that shit right now. See the sun setting, it's Egyptian. It east, my house face the east. It rise, I rise, it set now. Man, you know, I ain't even cut on the light. Y'all gonna rock with me. So we're gonna see how deep this rabbit hole goes. This is the story of Joseph. Let me see, what was I? What was I? Okay. Okay. This situation actually occurred when Joseph later became the governor of Egypt. His brothers stood before him suing for his assistance, although they did not know that did not know that he was their betrayed brother. The plotters were ready with their false tales for their father, but in order to make it appear plausible, they came sometime after sundown to show that they had made an effort to search for their brother and save him. They wanted to make out that they were not negligent of Joseph. They were naturally having games and exercises while the boys was left with their belongings. It was the racing that prevented them from seeing the wolf. And Jacob's fears about the wolf made them imagine that he was swallowed or be swallowed by a wolf. Story readily. They were surprised that Jacob received the story about the wolf with cold and cruelty. They didn't believe that shit. So they grew pugilant, put on an air of injured innocence, crying and shit, two-faced, niggas being in the devil place with the two-face, okay, and bring out the bloodstained garment described in the next verse. Joseph wore a garment of many colors, which was a special garment particular to him, designer clothes. If the brother, if the niggas didn't know, the brother didn't know how to dress like Joseph, you know what I'm saying? They got on all red, you know what I'm saying, all blue. If the brethren could produce a blood stain before their father, they thought he would be convinced that Joseph had been killed by a wild beast. But the stain on the garment was a stain of false blood, not the blood of Joseph, but the blood of a goat, which the brethren had killed expressively, sacrificed. Remember that they said the goat for this purpose. Their device, however, was not quite convincing because, as some commentators have pointed out, that the garment was intact, which is unconceivable if a wolf had, indeed divided Joseph. So they're like, man, how the hell his coat still intact? I see the blood, but if he got divided by a wolf, like that. So I'm letting a man talk.
But then when somebody sailed around the world and we all got used to it, and now we travel around in jet planes and everything, we have no problem about feeling that the earth is globular. None whatever. We got used to it. So in the same way, Einstein's relativity theories, the curvature of the propagation of light, that began to bother people when Einstein started talking like that. But now we're all used to it. Well, in a few years, it will be a matter of common sense to very many people that they're one with the universe. It'll be so simple. And then maybe, if that happens, we shall be in a position to handle our technology with more sense. With love instead of with hate for our environment.
This concludes session 2 of Out of Your Mind, Essential Listening from the Alan Watts Audio Archives. Our program continues with session 3.
Let's finish this right here though. Jacob saw that there had been some foul play, and he did not hesitate to say so. In effect, he said, me, the tale you tell may be good enough for you who invented it, but what about me, your aged father? What is there left in life for me now, with my beloved son gone? And yet what can I do but hold my heart in patience and implore Allah's assistance? I have faith, and I know that all that he does is for the best. Then comes the cavalry of the unknown travelers, Mennonite or Mennonites, or Arab merchants travelers to Egypt with merchandise, America, by and such as balm of Gilead is Transjordania. In accordance with customs, the caravan was preceded by advanced parties to search out water and pitch a camp near. They naturally went to the well and let down their buckets. The water carrier is surprised and taken back. And he's saying, man, who is this sitting in the dark like that? When he finds a Yusuf, commonly appearance, innocent like an angel, with a face as bright as the sun. What is he to make of it? Anyhow, this nigga drink a lot of water. To see him in a delight, and he shout, is out of a piece of good news. Some commentators think that Barushia, the Arabic word for good news, is a proper noun. The name of the companion, the name of the companion to whom he shouted, stand. You know what I'm saying? In my situation, the Muslim that was on final calls came back. It was a caravan of merchants, and they think of everything in terms of money to be made out of selling final calls. He was an unknown, unplanned youth of surpassing beauty, with apparently a mind as refined as was his external beauty. If he could be sold in the opulent slave market of Memphis, or whatever was the capital of Hyrogorus dynasty being ruled in Egypt, what a price he would fetch. They was from the sell this nigga. They had indeed light upon the treasure, and they wanted to conceal him lest he was another slave and had run away from his master who might come and claim him, like somebody might come get this nigga, Django. The circumstances were particular, and the merchants were conscious. Buddha, stock and trade, capital, money, wealth, treasure, America. Let me finish talking.
We are playing a game. And the game runs like this. The only thing you really know is what you can put into words. Let's suppose I love some girl rapturously.
Hey,
and somebody says to me,
I love you,
would you really love her?
Peace to my mom.
Or how am I going to prove this?
I gotta be
Let's say, write poetry. Tell us all how much you love her, then we'll believe you. So if I'm an artist and I can put this into words and convince everybody that I've written the most ecstatic love letters ever written, they say, all right, okay, we'll admit it, you really do love her. But supposing you're not very articulate, are we going to tell you you don't love her? Surely not. You don't have to be Heloise and Abelard to be in love. So the whole game that our culture is playing is that nothing really happens unless it's in the newspaper. So when we are at a party and there's a great party, somebody said, it's too bad there wasn't a tape recorder. And so our children begin to feel that they don't exist authentically unless they get their names in the papers. And the fastest way of getting your name in the papers is to commit a crime.
Kill somebody.
Then you'll be photographed, then you'll appear in court, then everybody will notice you.
Hold on, church.
It really happened if it was recorded.
Hold on, FBG'd up. Understand what he's saying. In Chicago, the order to get on, it ain't about getting money no more. It's how many bodies you got. And you got to think about that. That means I kill somebody. Hold on, let me see myself so I can see myself in this situation, in this place. You got to kill somebody, you know what I'm saying? We all know about that drill music. Smoking on this, smoking on that. I'm smoking on Satan right here. I like smoking on Satan. What y'all know? Go back though, man. I'm getting distracted. I'm sorry, y'all. Like I say, like, subscribe, share. Godspeed TV. You can leave a comment if you done.
In other words, if you shout and there doesn't come back an echo, it didn't happen. Well, that's a real hang-up. It's true, there's fun with echoes. We all like singing in the bathtub because there's more resonance there. And when we play a musical instrument like a violin or a cello, it has a sounding box because that gives resonance to the sound. And in the same way, the cortex of the human brain enables us, when we are happy, to know that we are happy. And that gives a certain resonance to it. If you're happy and you don't know you're happy, there's nobody home. But this is the whole problem for us. Several thousand years ago, human beings evolved the system of self-consciousness. And they knew. There was a young man who said, though, it seems that I know that I know. What I would like to see is the I that knows me when I know that I know that I know. See? And this is the human problem. We know that we know. And so there came a point in our evolution when we didn't guide life by just trusting our instincts and had to think about it and had to purposely arrange and discipline and push our lives around in accordance with foresight and words and systems of symbols, accountancy, calculation, and so on. And then we worry. Once you start thinking about things, you worry as to whether you've thought enough. Did you really take all the details into consideration? Was every fact properly reviewed? And by Jove, the more you think about it, the more you realize that you really couldn't take everything into consideration because all the variables in any human decision are incalculable. So you get anxiety. And this, though, also, this is the price you pay for knowing that you know, for being able to think about thinking, to feel about feeling. And so you're in this funny position. Now then, do you see that this is simultaneously an advantage and a terrible disadvantage? What has happened here is that by having a certain kind of consciousness, a certain kind of reflexive consciousness, being aware of being aware, being able to represent what goes on fundamentally in terms of a system of symbols, such as words, such as numbers. You put, as it were, two lives together at once, one representing the other. The symbols representing the reality, the money representing the wealth. And if you don't realize that the symbol is really secondary, it doesn't have the same value. You know, people go to the supermarket and they get a whole cartload of goodies and they drive it through, and then the clerk fixes up the counter and this long tape comes out. And you say, $30, please. Everybody feels depressed because they give away $30 worth of paper, but they got a cartload of goodies. They don't think about that. They think they just lost $30. But you got the real wealth in the cart. All you parted with was the paper. Because the paper in our system becomes more valuable than the wealth. It represents power, potentiality, whereas the wealth, you think, oh, well, that's just necessary. You got to eat. I mean, that's to be really mixed up. So then, if you awaken from this illusion, and you understand that black implies white, self implies other, life implies death, or shall I say, death implies life. You can feel yourself not as a stranger in the world, not as something here on probation, not as something that has arrived here by fluke, but you can begin to feel your own existence as absolutely fundamental. What you are basically, deep, deep down, far, far in, is simply the fabric and structure of existence itself. So, say in Hindu mythology, they say that the world is the drama of God. God is not something in Hindu mythology with a white beard that sits on a throne and that has royal prerogatives. God in Indian mythology is the self, Sat Chidananda, which means Sat, that which is, Chit, that which is consciousness, that which is Ananda is bliss. And in other words, what exists, reality itself, is gorgeous. It is the plenum, the fullness of total joy. Wow-wee. And all those stars, if you look out in the sky, is a firework display like you see on the 4th of July, which is a great occasion for celebration. The universe is a celebration. It is a firework show to celebrate that existence is.
4th of July,
wow-wee. And then they say, but however, there's no point just in sustaining bliss. Right. Let's suppose
sitting under a tree alone.
And you would dig the way. Because the whole nature, not God in a politically kingly sense, but God in the sense of being the self, the deep down basic whatever there is. And you're all that. Only you're pretending you're not. And it's perfectly okay to pretend you're not. To be absolutely convinced, because this is the whole notion of drama. When you come into the theater, there is
Coming to the theater. What was I at? Northwell, all that they do. brethren sold him for a miserable price, for a few dirhams, well, ancient money, counted out in such low estimate, they did sell him, did they hold him. The man in Egypt who bought him said to his wife, make his stay among us honorable. May he, maybe he will bring us such good news and we shall adopt him as a son. So they just see his light, the light in him, you know what I'm saying, the energy. You know, you can look at a motherfucker and tell if you want to like deal with their ass for the rest of your life or not. Like, okay, I'm gonna allow you into my house, my home, and help you out. But deal with this motherfucker like that, you know what I'm saying? Where we at? Some people, yeah, good spirit, appreciative, humble, humility. You don't want to throw nobody that got supreme humility or a humble child or like, you know, trying to do right to the curb, you know what I'm saying? Thus did we establish Joseph in the land that he might teach him, that he or we may teach him the interpretation of stories and events, and Allah have full power and control over his affairs, but most among mankind know it not. When Joseph attained his full manhood, we gave him power and knowledge. Thus do we reward those who do right. So as I'm in the street gang banging, you know what I'm saying? As I'm reach manhood, I got initiated, you know what I'm saying? And I rode with that instead of that. So I left the brothers behind. They're like, nigga, you crazy. You know what I'm saying? I keep doing this shit and they think I'm crazy, but let the sun shine on me, though. Let me see. Let me make sure I got that photo out right. Sunshine on me, though. You know what I'm talking about? Fuck can I be crazy? They do that at will. Some motherfuckers can't houses facing that way and that way, and they can't even exceed that because of what's next to me is a building or a block or a plant. It's crazy though. Go back to what I was reading. Whenever a man told me I was going to smoke his blunt.
Proscenium arch and a stage, and down there is the audience. And everybody assumes their seats in the theater and are going to see a comedy, a tragedy, a thriller, or whatever it is. And they all know as they come in and pay their admissions that what is going to happen on the stage is not for real.
Stage. Threw him in a well.
But the actors have a conspiracy against this because they're going to try and persuade the audience that what is happening on the stage is for real. They want to get everybody sitting on the edge of their chairs. They want to get you terrified or crying or laughing. Absolutely captivated by the drama.
The wolf got Joseph. The wolf got Joseph. Now let's go. I'm going to do this live, you know what I'm saying? Demonstrate Bruce Lee style. We'll find out it's available. We want to explain that. When Joseph attained his full manhood, he was given. We gave him power and knowledge. Thus do we reward those who do right. A different mind, the situation appeared different. Joseph has left keenly the edge of his brother's treason. His father Jacob was lost in sorrow of the loss of his beloved and best beloved son. The brothers were exulting in their plan of getting rid of one whom they had hated. The merchants were gloating over their gains. Man, we found us a good nigga. Imagine that, finding money. You find a human like this money, like Roman 300. But the horizon, okay, hold on, y'all. But the horizon of all was limited. Allah knew their deeds, their feelings, motive, and He was working out His own plan. Neither best for us nor the worst of us. Nor whether our destiny is leading us, how evil plots are defeated and goodness comes to its own in a marvelous way. We'll read that again. Neither the best of us nor the worst of us, nor whether our destiny is leading us, how evil plots are defeated and goodness comes to its own in a marvelous way. The Rahehon or Duram, the Greek, the Rachichima or the Rachichima, a small silver coin was varied in weight and value at different times and in different states. You know, like weed illegal and shit like that. Weed ain't illegal over here. There was a mutual deceit on both sides. The brethren had evidently been watching to see what happened to Joseph. When they saw that the merchant had taken him up, they sat back, they watched and hid him. They came to claim price as a runaway slave. But dare not haggle over the price, lest their object to get rid of him should be defeated. The merchants were shrewd enough to doubt the claim in their own minds, but they dare not haggle lest they should lose a valuable acquisition, and so most precious of the human lives at the age was sold into slavery for a few silver pieces. Joseph is now clear of his jealous brethren in the land of Canaan. That's fucked up, you know what I'm saying? He had to go through all that, but now he can breathe. Now he can breathe. We're going to get back to it, but he can breathe a little bit. So now he breathes.
And if a skillful human actor can take in an audience and make people cry, think what the cosmic actor can do. Why, he can take himself in completely. He can play so much for real that he really believes it is. Like you sitting in this room, you think you're really here. Why, you've persuaded yourself that way. You've acted it so damn well that you know this is the real world. But you're playing it. It's because the audience and the actor is one. Because behind the stage, there's the green room. Off-scene, obscene, where the actors take off their masks. You know that the word person means mask? The persona, which is the mask worn by actors in Greco-Roman drama, because it has a megaphone-type mouth which throws the sound out in an open-air theater. So per through sona, what the sound comes through, that's the mask. How to be a real person, how to be a genuine fake. A mask. So the dramatis personae at the beginning of a play is the list of masks that the actors will wear. And so in the course of forgetting that this life is a drama, the word for the role, the word for the mask, has come to mean who you are genuinely, the person, the proper person. Incidentally, the word parson is derived from the word person.
Carnality, carnal. Joseph is now clear of his jealous brothers in the land of Canaan. The merchants took him to Egypt in the city of Memphis, or whatever was the Egyptian capital then. So they were flag boss, I think instead. He was exposed for sale by the merchants. The merchants had not miscalculated Masons. They were ready market for him. His handsome presence, his winning ways, his purity, his innocence, his intelligence, his integrity, combined with his courtesy and noble manliness, attracted all eyes to him. This was the keenest competition to purchase him, and in the highest court circle, even competitors was outbid by the highest or high court official, who was called in verse 30 below, as is, exalted in rank. You already know how that goes. The as is motive was perhaps worldly. Such a handsome, attractive, intelligent son would give him more honor, dignity, and power and wealth. Paul's done, and we're going to go into that. So y'all got to understand, like I go to David Faith, when I went to pastor or maybe Masons, but I connect with him on a situation. And if they place you next to them with the money, if they place you next to them, and they would recognize the Josephality in you, then they would be rewarded for recognizing that. You would be rewarded for working with him and understanding that even though you may be more than the elder, you still place yourself under the elder. I never disrespect my mom or my dad. You understand? Let me finish talking.
Person of the village, person around town, parson. Funny. So anyway then, this is the drama. I'm not trying to sell you on this idea in the sense of converting you to it. I want you to play with it. I want you to think of its possibilities. I'm not trying to prove it. I'm just putting it forward as a possibility of life to think about. So then, this means that you're not victims of a scheme of things, of a mechanical world, or of an autocratic God. The life you're living is what you have put yourself into. Only you don't admit it because you want to play the game, but it's happened to you. In other words, I got mixed up in this world. My parents, I had a father who got hot pants over a girl, and she was my mother. And because he was just a horny old man, and as a result of that, I got born. And I blame him for it and say, well, that's your fault. You've got to look after me. And he says, I don't see why I should look after you. You're just a result. But let's suppose we admit that I really wanted to get born, and that I was the ugly gleam in my father's eye when he approached my mother. That was me. I was desire. And I deliberately got involved in these things. Look at it that way instead. And that even if I got myself into an awful mess, and I got born with syphilis and the great Siberian itch, tuberculosis, and in the Nazi concentration camp, nevertheless, this was a game which was a very far-out play. It was a kind of cosmic masochism.
Okay. How eerily all our plans were to teach Joseph wisdom and power. He had to be tested, proven in righteousness, and advanced and established in Egypt, in the way prepared for Israel, his propensity to proclaim Allah's truth to the world and make possible the subsequent mission of Moses. Hadith might be stories, things imagined or related, things that happen in life or in true dreams. To suppose that the phenomenal events are the only reality is a mark of one-sided materialism. As Hamlet said to Othro, there are many things in heaven and earth, Othro, than they're dreamed of in your philosophy. External events have their own limited reality, but there are bigger realities behind them that sometimes appear darkly in the virgins or visions of ordinary men, but more clearly in the visions of poets, seers, sages, prophets. Joseph had to be trained in seeing the realities behind these events and visions. He was hated by his brothers and sold by them into slavery. They were sending visions along. They were sending him into the land of Egypt, where he was to be ruled, where he was to rule men. He loved his father dearly and was separate from him, and his mother had died early. But his affection was not blunted, but drawn to keep a keener edge with his benevolent work, which benefited millions in Egypt and in the world. His own visions of stars, sun, moon prostrated themselves before him, with no idle dream of selfish fools, but the prefigurement of power, or a power which used rightly was to make his own honor and an instrument of service to millions he had not seen, through men and women whose own proper dignity sanctioned through him. He was to understand the hidden meanings of what seemed frivolously or faculties, blundering, snares, evil plotting, love gone wrong, power used tyrannically. He was to interpret truth. Those who would He was to interpret truth to those who would never have reached it otherwise. There is a divinity that shapes our ends, rough hues, them as we will. Only in Shakespeare Hamlet verses 2, we have a vague and distinct idea, and irresolute, read it right, irresolute striving, an unsuccessful attempt at getting beyond to solid flesh. In Joseph, we have a prophet of Allah, sure in faith, above all carnal motive, advancing the destiny of mankind with conscious purpose. As a scroll of knowledge, wisdom, and powerful unfolds itself before him by the grace of Allah, all good and all powerful. In the land we straight, and land we cry for, praise to Allah. The land we strong, we never stray. Lead us to this day before we all see it to the day of light. give us tonight this daily bread and Cain. The hat was the strength. The hat was the shelter. That came with the strength. The bunny rabbit was the swiftness. Christ, Lord, in this unknown with his Lord. When Joseph left Canaan, he was a young and immature lad, but this nature was innocent and good. Through the vicissitudes of his fortune in Egypt, he grew in knowledge, judgment, and power. So they put him in the right place, accidentally trying to kill him. Moshad, those who do right, those who do good. Both ideas imply in following right conduct, you are easily doing good to yourself and others. Comes around, goes around. If I give, I will receive. See.
But I didn't. Isn't that an optimal game rule for life? Because if you play life on the supposition that you're a helpless little puppet that got involved, or if you play it on the supposition that it's a frightful, serious risk and that we really ought to do something about it and so on, it's a drag. There's no point in going on living unless we make the assumption that the situation of life is optimal. That really and truly we are all in a state of total bliss and delight. But we are going to pretend we aren't just for kicks. You play non-bliss in order to be able to experience bliss. And you can go as far out as non-bliss as you want to go. And when you wake up, it'll be great. You know, you can slam yourself on the head with a hammer because it's so nice when you stop. And it makes you realize, you see, how great things are when you forget that that's the way it is. And that's just like black and white. You don't know black unless you know white. You don't know white unless you know black. It's simply fundamental. So then, here's the drama. My metaphysics, let me be perfectly frank with you, are that there is the central self. You can call it God, you can call it anything you like. And it's all of us. It's playing all the parts of all beings whatsoever, everywhere and anywhere. And it's playing the game of hide and seek with itself. It gets lost, it gets involved in the farthest out adventures, but in the end, it always wakes up and comes back to itself. And when you're ready to wake up, you're going to wake up. And if you're not ready, you're going to stay pretending that you're just a little, poor little me. And since you're all here and engaged in this sort of inquiry and listening to this sort of lecture, I assume that you're all on the process of waking up. Or else you're teasing yourselves with some kind of flirtation with waking up, which you're not serious about. But I assume maybe you are not serious but sincere, that you are ready to wake up. So then, when you're in the way of waking up and finding out who you really are, you meet a character called a guru. As the Hindus say this word, the teacher, the awakener. And what is the function of a guru? He's the man who looks at you in the eye and says, oh, come on. I know who you are. You know, you come to the guru and say, sir, I have a problem. I'm unhappy and I want to get one up on the universe, or I want to become enlightened. I want spiritual wisdom.
She whose house he was sought to seduce him. He fastened the door and said, now come. He said, Allah forbid, truly thy husband is my Lord. He made my sojourn agreeable, truly to no good come to those who do wrong. Like, look, I'm in a cool situation and I already know you got a whole other husband. You're trying to seduce me to put my dick in your pussy and all of a sudden you're trying to kill me, which my brother's already trying to kill me. We go with that Adam and Eve shit. It's all good though, we gonna rock. So okay. So Joseph like, nah, hold up, nah. And with passion did she desire him, and he would have desired her. But that he saw the evidence of his Lord, thus did we order that we might turn away from him all evil. innocent deeds, for he was of our servant chosen. Sit back, see what he gonna do. You know what I'm saying? Could, he couldn't. It's all depending on his fact in reality, because at this stage, the Joker probably would. But at that time, it was, you couldn't do the Joker at that time. You know, Satan was walking around with the niggas. So let's go. Who's we at? Oh, the chosen. Yeah, man, I'm up here reading the scriptures going in. My bad, y'all. Okay. The as is had treated Joseph with honor, as is, supreme. You know what I'm saying? 5%. He was most, he was more his guest and son than a slave. And trying to seduce Joseph in these circumstances, his wife was guilty of a crime against Joseph on honor and dignity. And there was a third fault in their earthly love. True love blots out self. It thinks more of the love of one than of self. True love blots out self. It thinks more of the love of one than of himself. The Isaiah's wife was seeking the satisfaction of her own selfish passion and was a treason against Joseph's pure soul and his high dignity. It was inevitable that Joseph should repel in the advances made by the wife of the courier. So what he's saying is Joseph kind of knew, like, hold on, I can't already, if I do this, I can't, you know what I'm saying? He knew he was going to be okay, if he resisted. And Joseph put his dick in there, it was a wrap. And it wasn't because it was wrong, but now it was destined for them to find out that your ass put your dick in it and you killed you, you know what I'm saying? But Joseph had a lot of sense, he went on that. You can't, like I said, man, you ain't even fuck all that strip club, giving bitches my money. But you let this man talk about smoke. Let me be fucking playing. Y'all understand what I'm saying, right? Godspeed, TV, like, subscribe, share. Please comment. Say this is bullshit. Say something. Say fuck this shit.
Sri Ramana Maharshi, that great Hindu sage of modern times, people used to come to him and say, Master, who was I in my last incarnation? As if that mattered. And he would say, who is asking the question? And he'd look at you and say, basically, go right down to it. You're looking at me, you're looking out, and you're unaware of what's behind your eyes. Go back in and find out who you are, where the question comes from, why you ask. And if you've looked at a photograph of that man, I have a gorgeous photograph of it. And you look in those, I walk by it every time I go out of the front door.
Joseph.
I look at those eyes and the humor, the lilting laugh that says, oh, come on.
It's Marky. So they both raced each other to the door, and she tore his shirt from the back. Oh, shit. They both found her lord near the door, she said. What is the fitting punishment for one who formed an evil disguise against thy wife? But prisons or a grievous chastisement, he said. It was she that sought to seduce me from my true self. And one of her household saw this and bore witness. Thus, if it had be that his shirt, if it be that his shirt is rent from the front, then you keep reading this a little bit for y'all. Is her tale true? And he is a liar. Back to the metaphysical that. Let me finish talking though. I drink some water. That jokes.
Shiva, I recognize you.
Mm-hmm.
When you come to my door and you say, I'm so-and-so, I say, ha ha, what a funny way God has come on today.
I hear what you're talking about. Okay, so let's go. So we're going back down. The Aziz had threatened Joseph with humor or honor. The Aziz had treated Joseph with honor. He wanted to put his brain. He was more a guest than a son. I read that already. Joseph's plea in rejecting her advances is threefold. One, I owe my duty, and so do you to your husband, the Aziz, God Body Supreme. 2, the kindness, courtesy, and honor with which he has treated me entitle him to more than a mere gratitude from me. 3, in any case, do you not see that you are harboring a guilty passion and that no good can come from out of guilt? You must obey laws, human and divine. She was blinded with passion. She like, fuck that man. You crazy. Let's see what he got to say though. She was blinded with passion. Shit, Joseph,
there are all sorts of tricks, of course, that gurus play.
Must be the Pharisees assume too much in tune with my soul. I cannot be faithful
well,
in a room full of holes.
We're going to put you through the mill. And the reason they do that is simply that you
going down, y'all.
won't
I ain't gonna do nothing to the light.
wake up
rock. Fuck that.
until you feel you've paid a price for it.
This motherfucker blunt.
In other words, the sense of guilt that one has, or the sense of anxiety, is simply the way one experiences keeping the game of disguise going on. Do you see that? Supposing you say, I feel guilty. Christianity makes you feel guilty for existing. That somehow, the very fact that you exist is an affront. You are a fallen human being. I remember as a child when we went to the services of the church on Good Friday, they gave us each a colored postcard with Jesus crucified on it. And it said underneath, this have I done for thee. What doest thou for me? You know, you felt awful. You nailed that man to the cross. Because you eat steak, you have crucified Christ. Because you killed the bull. After all, you depend on it. Mithra, it's the same mystery. And what are you going to do about that? This have I done for thee, what doest thou for me? It doesn't exist at all.
Joseph pleaded and rejected her advances in threefold. She was blinded with passion, and his plea had no effect on her. She wasn't born. He was human after all, and her passion and love and her beauty placed a great temptation in his path. But he had a sure refuge, his faith in Allah. That boy's gonna take Allah. Let me explain that to you. But do what he did, gonna take Allah. Booty big like that, juicy, camel toe. You know what I'm saying? He ain't got no reason not to do this. Most niggas today will do it. Then you got a week later off with your head. You know what I'm saying? FBGW on the street type shit. Where's we at? It must be the Pharisees in tune with my soul. I cannot be faithful in the room full of holes. That's what we said. Okay. Where's we at? His spiritual eye saw something that her eyes, blinded by passion, did not see. He thought no one saw when the doors were closed. She thought no one saw when the doors were closed. She thought no one saw when the doors were closed. He knew that Allah was there, arm, leg, arm, head, that made him strong and proof against temptation. The credit of our being saved from sin is due not to our weak earthly nature, but to Allah. We can only try, like Joseph, to be true and sincere. Allah will purify us and save us from all that is wrong. Tempted but true. We rise above all. We rise above ourselves. Feel spirit. Go ahead, Alan, take off.
But that sense of guilt,
did I read this yet?
Is the veil across the sanctuary. Don't you dare come in. In order to, in all mysteries, when you're going to be initiated, with somebody saying, don't you come in. You've got to fulfill this requirement, and this requirement, and this requirement, and this requirement. Then we'll let you in. So you go through the mill. Why? Because you're saying to yourself, I won't wake up until I feel I deserve it. I won't wake up until I've made it difficult for me to wake up. So I invent for myself an elaborate system of delaying my waking up. I put myself through this test and that test, and when I feel it's been sufficiently arduous, then I may at last admit to myself who I really am and draw aside the veil and realize that after all, when all is said and done, I am that I am, which is the name of God.
With his master's wife in her mad passion, the situation became intolerable, and Joseph made for the door. She ran after him to detain him. She tugged at his garment to detain him. Here they go, ripping his shirt up again. As he was retreating, she could only catch hold of the back of his shirt, and in the struggle she tore it. He was determined to open the door and leave the place, as it was useless to argue with her in her mad passion. When the door was open, it opened so that Aziz was off not far. In crack he could see. We need not assume that he was spying or had any suspicions either of his wife or Joseph. In his narrow, limited way, he just was a man. We can imagine his wife's consternation. One guilt leads to another. She had to resort to a lie, not only to justify herself, but also have her revenge on a man who had scorned her love, slighted love, a physical kind. If she don't take that, boy, you offer the pussy, you be like, no, you're gonna kill your ass. Hold on, y'all. Joseph, okay. Slight love of a physical kind made her furious, and she lost all sense of right and wrong. Man, this nigga tried to rape me. Joseph bore himself with dignity. He was too great and noble to indulge in any reclamation, but he had held to truth, and he did it with quite simplicity. The love game was hers and not his, and it went too far in seeking to assault his person. In the nature of things, there was no eyewitness to what had happened between them, but as there was a scene that the whole household collective wisdom came through one who was not immediately concerned. They say it was a child. If so, it illustrated the truth that was the most obvious thing are not noticed by people who are excited, but are plain too simple, people who remain calm. Read that again. It is so, it illustrates the truth that most obvious things are not noticed by people who are excited, but are plain too simple, people who remain calm. Wisdom comes often through babies and sucklings. You know what I'm saying? So it's a little baby got him out that jam.
And when it comes to it, that's really rather funny. They say in Zen, when you attain Satori, nothing is left you at that moment but to have a good laugh. But naturally, all masters, Zen masters, yoga masters, every kind of master, puts up a barrier and says to you, it simply plays your own game. You know, we say anybody who goes to a psychiatrist ought to have his head examined.
Right, yes, right.
Because when you go to a psychiatrist, you define yourself as somebody who ought to have his head examined. Same way, the Zen masters say anybody who studies Zen or comes to a Zen master ought to be given 30 blows with a stick. Because he was stupid enough to pose the question that he had a problem. But you're the problem. You put yourself in this situation. So it's a question fundamentally. Do you define yourself as a victim of the world or as the world? You can define yourself. You see, if you identify you with what you call the voluntary system of the nerves and say, only that's me, and that's really a rather limited amount of my total performance, what I do voluntarily, then you've defined yourself as the victim in the game. And so you are able to feel that life was a trap.
Y'all, we're going to get to probably chapter 2 tonight or tomorrow. Joseph Copeland covers. 7 spearhead Heru. Feminine aspect of creativity in you. It's your boy Promo, aka Blue Spiritual. You know how I do. I'm gonna say me a prayer. I'm gonna say a prayer before I leave. I'm sure Promo say God. See, I got one. Black crows, air raid, magenta rose, code for sure. My coded effort, strong and reckless, swift and reckless, swift unseen, like the wind, but felt like bumpy face gin, north altitude, move again, left, right, left. My strategy led to depth, blood of grown, matrix of tones. The deepest third true tone, pinky made a stone. Ready to dip, gems, fresh blue sky, dirty earth for sand. Roll the smoke, say blue choke, titanium, blue blood. She's control love, don't blood, skulls and bones, face 5% of me with no trace. EJ seal me face. Curriculum, young bricks of bread was made to feed the hungry, nothing head, her head.